Today on Disability Life TV, we're going to talk about something you've been listening to in the news. That's right. Bathrooms, universities, moms and dads. Coming right up.
Disability Life TV is sponsored by Connor Dental Associates.
Hello everyone, my name is Yvette Pegues and I am your host today on Disability Life TV. And I'm happy to have an amazing guest today. We're going to talk to Dr. Erin Swenson. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So much we need to talk about, but let's just introduce our guest, learn more about her, and talk about why she's here today and how we met. So how are you today?
I am very well, thank you, Yvette.
You look very well.
Yes,
I'm so happy to
thank you.
finally have her on the show. We've been semi-stalking her
it's
for
been
a
a little
while.
hard, but
Yeah.
we got here.
We did,
So,
we
yeah.
did, and I'm so glad you're here. Tell us about baby Erin. Let's start from the beginning. Things that we might not already know about you.
Oh,
Tell us
that's
about
a
your
lot of
childhood.
stuff.
It is. Where were you born?
I was born in Buffalo, New York,
Okay.
during a snowstorm in March,
Okay.
and grew up there for the first 10 years and moved to Georgia with my family.
Yes.
My daddy worked for a 3M company and moved him here.
Okay.
And so
Normal childhood? Lots of fun?
I had a great childhood.
Okay.
I was probably, looking back on it, was probably a little more shy than most boys.
Wow.
I was a boy back then.
Wait. So Dr. Erin Swenson, just in case you didn't hear her, she was a boy back then. Tell us about that.
I was a boy.
Please elaborate.
Like everybody else, I was my gender was announced at birth by the doctor, and he told my parents that I was a boy. So I was their firstborn, and I probably was a fairly normal little boy.
Okay.
I was probably a little more sensitive than most boys are.
Got it.
I didn't like to act up. I did not like to be doing things that were wrong. I always wanted to please the adults.
Wow.
Which may have been because I was sort of the firstborn, but
Right.
also because I was a boy. And when I was 10, for the very first time, I started wanting to grow up to be a woman.
How does that happen? Explain how you go from being a boy for 10 years and then at 10 you had other siblings, right?
I have two sisters.
So you were the only boy.
Two younger sisters. I was the only boy.
Okay. So tell me about the environment or the decision or the feeling that you had at 10. Is that something you can describe now in retrospect?
I think so.
Okay.
I was in the 5th grade. We were living in Sandy Springs, Georgia, and in a very nice home, which was in a very loving home.
Right.
So I cannot point to any sort of trauma in my life that would
That's a good point.
be a part of that. And I remember going to school in the 5th grade.
Right.
You go to school, and it was back when elementary school, you went from elementary to high school. There were no middle schools back in the Middle Ages. Yes, way back in the last century. The kids came back to school after summer break.
Okay.
And there were girls in the 6th and 7th grades there too.
Okay.
And they were starting to blossom into young women.
Oh yeah, that is the age.
And it was just what I wanted. It was just, I didn't tell anyone, of course. I knew that it was, I want to say the word wrong.
Taboo maybe?
Taboo probably is a good word, because
Okay.
it just was way beyond the pale. It was way outside of. I had no words for it,
Right.
and certainly none of my friends, none of my boy friends, had any similar feelings.
Wow.
So I had to live with that through adolescence and early adulthood.
Puberty.
Puberty.
Oh my gosh, how was puberty?
It was a nightmare.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it was awful.
Okay.
And I started to have to shave
Yes.
really early. I was still 10 years old, and it was a devastating day for me. I wanted my face to stay nice and smooth like all the girls.
Like now?
Yeah, like now, yeah.
So tell me about when you transitioned from the taboo of wanting and yearning to be more like a female and the young ladies that were blossoming to actually having words and making that transition. Can you take us through that?
It was a long trip.
Really?
Yes. It took me 47 years to get there.
Okay, so how old are you? Do you mind?
69.
69. So we'll talk about you putting that in a bottle for me later, but let's talk about that long decade.
It was filled with trying to do whatever I could to appear normal. And so I did all the normal stuff that I could. I went to college. I got married after my second year of college.
Right.
In 1967. And we have two wonderful daughters. Laura, is one of them.
Exactly. Laura was on our show just a few weeks ago.
She is a wonderful kid.
She is.
And of course, life was challenging with Laura, especially in the beginning. I went to seminary and graduated with honors.
Yay, me too.
And got ordained as a Presbyterian minister. So I felt like I was well hidden. I was well hidden. I then became a psychotherapist.
Right.
And I think partly because of the nurturing nature of that sort of work.
Right.
There's a kind of a feminine quality to it, even though a lot of therapists are men.
That's true.
So it was a really great place for me to be, and it worked until I started. Sigrid, my wife, knew that I was struggling with gender stuff.
Wow.
She didn't know the extent of it at all.
Did she know before you got married?
No.
Got it.
Oh no. And when it became clear after we were married that getting married didn't fix me, because I thought during adolescence that somehow falling in love, and I fell in love with a wonderful woman. She is. If you think Laura's great, you should meet her mom. And she is fabulous. And we've been divorced now for 22 years.
Wow.
But I still love her. She is still my heartthrob. She, I started letting her know little bits and pieces, because I would start experimenting with things like wearing pantyhose and underneath my clothes.
Khakis.
My khakis underneath my yeah, underneath my military fatigues, I would work. It became worse over time. I really intended my whole life that it would just be a secret that I would die with.
Wow.
I knew that it would be turbulent for my family and the world around me, which is why I moved into such a. I was in a great place. I was a successful psychotherapist.
Right.
My office was I was on Peachtree Street in Atlanta.
Wow.
I was making lots of money.
Wow.
Had a couple of part-time gigs on the side, one with the Episcopal Cathedral, and another one with a college in North Georgia, and I did work for them, did some consulting work. It was great.
So let me ask you, you talked about being hidden.
Yes.
Were those intentional steps toward masking your feelings and desires? Do you do those things on purpose? Because it really does sound like you were so well positioned. I couldn't imagine looking at you based on the picture that you've painted for me and saying, there's something about him that's not quite
You would not have seen it, which is why when I finally couldn't take it any longer, I was into my fourth therapist in 20 years. Had tried every antidepressant and anti-anxiety pill that you could take. None of it worked, and my depression was getting worse. And so I I love my family sincerely.
Of course.
I was in such pain that I started thinking about suicide.
So can we stop and pause there for a moment?
Okay, sure.
Dr. Erin, being a psychotherapist
Mhm.
and such a successful human being, talked about at least 2 invisible disabilities.
Right,
Depression and suicide.
right.
And those are huge. And they're not mutually exclusive.
No, they are kind of kissing cousins.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. And I had been familiar with the depression part for a
Right.
long time, and everybody around me knew that I was depressed. I mean, so it wasn't so invisible. I shamefully, I really allowed people to believe that it was Laura's disability that was bothering me. So it made sense to my colleagues
Ooh.
and to the extended family, and I am not proud that I did that, but I did.
But that wasn't by design, was it?
No, I just let it happen.
You let
And
it happen.
People,
you didn't
people
you didn't
believe
deny
that.
It. You
No,
didn't deny it.
no.
So let's just take a moment to talk about Laura. For those who may have missed the show where Laura was my special guest, I absolutely highly recommend you go back and watch that episode.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Laura's disability, because on the show she talked about the transition for her.
Right.
And watching her dad become a woman, she said, was a little
Hard.
uncomfortable for
Hard.
her.
It was very hard for her.
So she does have a physical disability.
She does.
Okay. And can we just
And she
touch
has an
that for a moment?
intellectual disability.
So she has a physical and an intellectual disability. And
Right.
I had the blessing and opportunity to meet them both in My Voice, My Participation, My Board class, where I was the teacher, the educator, and it was taking place through Georgia State University's disability program.
Right.
So, I mean, I was honored, but can
It
I
was
tell
wonderful.
you, I did not say, oh, okay, Dr. Erin's transgender. It
Yes.
never crossed my mind. I
Okay,
think it may have
right.
come up in conversation.
Right.
So, we have a few more minutes before we break for our sponsors.
Okay.
Can you just take us to the break and tell us about what you knew about what Laura was going through, just in a few words?
Well, she made it rather obvious to the family. She,
Wow.
Laura is verbal,
She is.
and she said a lot, and so she was very unhappy. It was difficult for her at first. She was really the first person in the family to accept that I was a woman.
Wow. Wow.
But she had real difficulty keeping me as a woman and my being her father. Those two things, she couldn't hold those together in her head. So for a long time, she struggled with wanting to have a new father.
Oh, wow.
She wanted her grandfather to be her father. She wanted to pick new fathers. She was trying to pick partners for Sigrid so that she could have a new father.
Yeah.
And it all worked for her in her head until I explained, well, if that happens, then I'm not going to be in your life anymore. And she said, oh, no, you're still here too. And so
One
it was
big happy
big
triangle.
happy families, yeah,
Okay.
big happy family.
Wow.
So it took her several years to sort of get comfortable with that, and she's worked at it. I really have to say, she went to see a therapist every week for a while,
Wow.
and she was very intentional about wanting to get it worked out, and she did.
And
She
see,
did.
here's what's amazing about what you just told me, right? We went from saying that Laura was diagnosed with not just a physical, but an intellectual disability. But imagine, if you will, what it took for her to intellectualize all of
Right.
this. And I don't believe that her concern and issues about it had anything to do with her intellectual disabilities. In fact, it has had to do with daddy being mommy and mommy not having a husband. So I love that we can talk about this not just from a perspective of disabilities, but just being a daughter, being a husband, being a woman. And so what's really important to understand here is that this is so much bigger and so much more prevalent. And that's why we're on Disability Life TV. And as we go to our break, we want to thank our sponsor, Connor Dental in Kennesaw, Georgia. Thanks so much for sponsoring us. We'll be right back.
Connor Dental Associates, full-service dentistry, providing orthodontics, implants, laser dentistry, and general care, set in a calm and relaxing environment. Our experienced dentist and staff are here to maintain your dental health, improve your appearance and quality of life. Compassionate, professional, and informative. Ask about our core whitening system, servicing insured and non-insured patients of all ages. Located in Kennesaw, near I-75. Call today and experience the difference for yourself.
Welcome back to Disability Life TV. We have with us Dr. Erin Swenson. And prior to the break, we talked about Laura, her daughter, who's also been on the show, and her transition during her dad's transition to not being mom, but to being a woman. So tell me about the point at which you physically made the change, or if you physically made the change. Are you comfortable discussing that?
It took a couple of years.
Okay.
I can talk about that. It was
Thank you.
It was between 1994 and 1996.
Okay.
And it took a long time. I think the thing that earmarks that, there are two major events that I think are really important for people to know.
Okay.
One is the moment that I realized that I was going to transition.
Wow. Okay.
That was a big one for me because my whole life had never dreamed about it, never thought that I would any time do that.
Right.
And so it was, I went to see a therapist in Baltimore. I flew to Baltimore to see a therapist. And she listened to me for hours and hours and hours, crying and trying, saying, please, help me out of this. There's some way out of this. And she said, I'm confused about my gender. And she said, oh, no, you're not confused about your gender. You know what your gender is. You're just afraid that nobody's going to understand.
Wow.
And she said, there's something else that you need to know.
What's that?
As a Presbyterian minister, I think you have very little faith. She really got me.
That's ironic.
She did. Well, she was right. I mean, she said, you have all these people in your life who love you, like Laura.
Right.
And yes, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard for them, but you really believe that they're not going to love you anymore. Oh, wow. And that really was true. Wow. And so I started transitioning almost immediately. I started by having my beard removed, which was wonderful. It was the best part of the transition for me.
Was it painful?
Yes. Yes, it was painful.
Okay.
Kind of like about 200,000 bee stings on your face.
Oh gosh. And she can laugh about it. Okay.
Yes. I was probably living full time as Erin.
Right.
6 months after I started, and at that point, I had to confront something really important.
What's that?
The fact that I was an ordained Presbyterian minister.
Exactly. So let me ask you something, Dr. Erin, before we move forward. Did your name change?
Oh, yes.
So you weren't always Erin. Erin's kind of one of those names that can, apply.
Right.
But you took the step to specifically change your name.
Yes, and most people like me do that,
Got
unless
it.
they have. Erin was not my name before.
Got it.
And most people who go through transition do name changes. It used to be, 20 or 30 years ago, if you changed gender expression, they would force you to take on a specifically feminine name. They wouldn't want you to take Erin or Pat or
Got it.
or Kelly or anything like that. They would want you to take something like Barbara or Susan or something like that.
Got it.
And my name was Eric, E-R-I-C.
Got it.
So I just changed the C to an N and changed gender. And it's gotten me out of some tough situations.
Did your credit improve?
No,
Okay.
no, it was the same poor credit that I had before. Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Tell us about part 2 of the transition.
The church piece, which was difficult. I had to stay ordained.
Okay.
I did not have the luxury to decide to give up my ordination.
Got it.
And the church started examining me with the idea that they might take my ordination away from me.
Wow.
And so it was a difficult time. we had many meetings, and it became a denomination-wide thing.
Wow.
It got into the newspapers. There was a major article in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that really exposed me for the first time.
Wow.
And what I had wanted to be a very quiet gender transition became very public.
Wow.
And so I had to deal with television cameras and.
Unlike these, right?
Unlike these, yeah. This is a friendly one.
Exactly.
This is a great one.
Okay.
It took a couple of years. It was difficult. It was not going my way.
Got it.
And so I had to keep my ordination because it was the health insurance for our family.
Oh.
Which meant that it was the health insurance for Laura.
Yes.
So there was no way that I could tolerate any possibility of losing that. So I was fighting tooth and nail for Laura. So we worked for a couple of years on it.
Right.
By the time the church worked out the problem and got the insurance set up so that Laura and I could continue to be insured, and they came to me and said, you can leave the ministry now because we've got that covered for you. By then, I had met so many people from churches, so many committed Christians who didn't feel like they could belong to a church because they were transgender, who said when they saw a newspaper article about a transgender Presbyterian minister, it was just amazing to them. And so I had met a number of those. There was one woman in particular who just was a very active member of a large church and had been there for years, and and I put my hand, we were eating at a greasy spoon here in Atlanta, and I put my hands across the table and grabbed her hands and said, I'm so glad to meet a fellow transgender Presbyterian, because at that point I had never met one face to face. And she said, oh, but I'm not a Presbyterian. I said, what? You just told me how important the church is to you. And she said, I didn't think God wanted me to join the church. So by the time they worked out the insurance thing, my heart was moved in a new direction.
Wow.
And my calling, and pretty much since then, I have been an advocate for transgender and gender nonconforming people, as well as persons with disabilities.
Oh, definitely.
So
that part
I have intersectionalities all over the place.
I love intersectionality. We've
Yes.
talked about it on the show quite a bit.
Yeah.
But as we intersect into another area of ministry that you have been working on, talk to me about the church meeting that you had recently about a topic that's in the news today.
Oh,
Bathrooms.
A friend of mine who was at the seminary locally
Yes.
was a member of one of the large local Baptist churches.
Right.
And her pastor was getting ready to do a sermon, and part of the sermon was going to address the bathroom issue.
So we're talking about, if I may interrupt,
Yeah.
bathrooms that have either no gender or partial gender,
Right.
which is huge in the news, and it's huge on the president's docket list.
Right.
So the fact that you were invited in a position of ministry to talk about this
Right.
is incredible. So let's spend a few
so, too.
moments with that.
I thought so too, and he did not want to preach about it without personal experience.
Wow.
So we met for coffee and drank lots of cups of coffee over about 3 hours.
Wow.
And we talked about it, and I think we developed a kind of a liking for each other.
Okay.
He's a really nice guy, and I think he enjoyed himself talking with me. But it was also clear that there's a gulf that we're trying to get over,
Right.
and it's very painful. It's very painful for me, and I think it was painful for him.
Of course it is. What are your thoughts about it? Give me your personal
Well,
thoughts on this bathroom dilemma. Because I just want to make this, I think I can make this point with you more than anyone else.
Okay.
There's so much focus on this bathroom thing, but yet people with disabilities have this same and very similar problem using the bathroom and toileting in public. So to look at the two for me just blows my mind. But
Right.
before we get into my mind being blown, let's talk about talk about how you feel about these bathrooms.
Okay.
I'd love to hear both of your perspectives. Maybe that's
well,
another show.
You know, I have this problem because I love the church. The
Right.
church, I grew up in the church.
Right.
And in many ways, my participation in the church as an adolescent probably saved me. And so I was ordained in the church with full faith
Right.
that I was called to the ministry.
Right.
So I love the church, but I'm also transgender, and I have lots of friends who are transgender, and I work with hundreds, thousands of people across the country
Wow.
who are transgender,
Okay.
and that's a reality too.
Right.
And the problem, I think, for most people and for this pastor,
Right.
sort of boiled down to, well, the scripture says there are
Right.
only men and women. That's it.
Right.
There are men, and then there are women, and of course, if you really look at the Old Testament very much, there's really only one gender, which is men. You know, women are kind of a junior member of humanity in terms of the Levitical laws and many of the social structures of the time.
Wow.
Very much like you would probably see in places today like Afghanistan.
Okay. Wow.
And so there's still this struggle. My thought is that trying to get churches to help separate the gender stuff from all the other good stuff that they get from the scripture, helping to understand that religious doctrines or religious documents for Christianity, Judaism, and Islam all were created during periods that were very highly patriarchal. And so the religious writings are infused with the patriarchal culture in which they were born. And I think it's a mistake for the church to elevate gender to the status of religious norm. I don't think it was really intended to be that. I think that's part of the culture from which it grew.
Right.
We no more would adopt that than we would people walked all the time in
That's
those
true.
cultures.
That's
So
true.
why don't we say that cars are immoral? And we have, some people wanted to say, and there are some religious sects that do say we can't use cars.
So let me ask you then, is the gender bathroom issue more a church struggle? Is it a people struggle? In your opinion, where do you think that struggle lies? I mean, I wish we had more time, but...
Yeah.
You
I don't think it's a struggle really at all.
Okay.
Transgender people have been using bathrooms for decades.
Right.
Without any difficulty.
Okay.
It became an issue when Houston passed a non-discrimination ordinance a couple of years ago.
Right.
And they succeeded in getting the courts to say it had to be subjected to a referendum, which created a campaign.
Right.
And the people on the opposition
Right.
realized that this bathroom issue was one way to broaden their reach, because the religious right is a fairly limited group of people.
Okay.
And I don't think most people in our country today would consider themselves to be a part of the religious right. But they were able to make an argument which was, we don't want men in women's bathrooms.
Right. I've heard that one.
And so, the issue for me was, it really continues to be helping people to really understand that a transgender woman, like I am, is not a man. And
Wait, stop. Say that again. I think that's a very important identity point. So you're saying, again, that what? A transgender
woman
Tell our
is
audience.
not a man, and also a transgender man is not a woman.
So can we say then, Dr. Erin, that you are for the bathrooms having transgender identity for those?
I'm for open bathrooms. I really think that we should be moving more toward a society where bathrooms don't have genders. They just have really nice stalls with doors, and and spend
And
extra money and have really
facilities.
nice facilities for
Okay.
everybody, and we not worry about it. Some countries are that way now,
Huh.
and my guess is we'll probably wind up being there probably before too long.
Well, here's the thing, and I always really get emotional towards the end of our show, but we are at the
Okay.
end of our show, and I just am so honored that the platform was available for you to have this conversation with our guests.
Oh.
And the one thing that we do at the end of every show is we have something called a D-Life Diamond, a nugget, something that you would like to close the show out with, whether it be a quote or a specific belief. What
Oh.
is your diamond for the Disability Life TV show today? Let's see if we can do it in 10 words or less.
I've struggled my whole life with being a boy and with being a girl.
Wow.
I probably never was really a boy. And I'm probably not really a woman, not in the same sense that you are. It's taken me a long time to understand that as a child of God, what I am is Erin. I'm myself. And I think that's probably the best gift that every person can bring to the world, is to be yourself. And I hope everyone feels encouraged in that way.
Well, it's been a gift to have you on the Disability Life TV show today. I love you for watching, and tune in again. And thank you to Dr. Erin for being on the show
Thank
today.
you.
Thank you so much.
Mm.